Hello, amateurs. Welcome back to our Six Nations series. And I have got Mike from Fratelli D'Rugby with me again today. There he is. Hi, Mike. How you doing?
Tim, very well. Thank you, mate. Thank you for having me on again.
No worries. And in this episode, we are going to be doing a bit of a deep dive into the Scotland-Italy match from the weekend. And we're both a little bit sad because both our teams lost. But Mike, what were your sort of overall impressions of the game from Saturday?
It's a tough post-mortem, isn't it? Because ultimately, we lost by 5 tries to 1. As much as the score, was 12 points difference, I definitely felt Scotland were 12 points better than us. But also there was times where I felt like we were the architects of our own destruction again, where, we were quite close to the line and silly mistakes and, soft tries at the 60th minute. Those lapses in concentration really did sort of, where there's points of the game where you're pretty sure, okay, this is the momentum swing, it's going to make or break. They came at the worst time and, they just broke, if that makes sense. So, tough game. But from a stats standpoint, which is not sort of normally my forte in our podcast, but we were considerably better than last year in almost every facet of the game, which is ironic because we won last year. So I take what you want from that, but that's it's just an interesting sort of point I think that we need to raise.
Yeah, it's interesting. I often think that stats can be misleading. It really depends on how you use them, and the actual key points of the game are often more important. So I don't know. I'm sure they are useful. Otherwise, every team wouldn't be using them, so they must have some value for sure, but they can definitely be misleading.
Oh, for sure. But the core sort of areas that I was really interested in from last year to this year was stuff like line out, line out efficiency, taking on our own line outs, and obviously being productive on that as well. Set piece, we seem to be more than competitive, and we're still waiting on Spaniolo to come back, as we previously spoke about as well. So some exciting players to come back to really bolster that as well. So hey, for me, I'll take it as a first round. There's plenty to learn. I spoke to a couple of the boys, and unanimously they were like, that felt like a true test match. Like, bodies are sore. It was a tough game, and they let it out. They laid it all out there.
Yeah, there's no question about that. Now, it was interesting for me before the game. The RFU president, Mr. Keith Wallace, is a former podcast guest. I'll link that one up there for people to go and have a look. He was showing Princess Anne around, so it's nice to see a former podcast guest on the telly. But let's get into the start of the game. And Scotland got a lot of joy early on. Big Doohan getting down the left-hand side. And Scotland played with a lot of pace and a lot of good physicality as well, I would say.
Yeah, for sure. They brought intensity, and like you said, they started strong. We typically are the opposite, right? So I think I mentioned to you when we were doing our preview, if we start strong, or if we let them, get away in the first 20 minutes, it's going to be a long day for us. And unfortunately, we didn't even quite make it to the 20 minutes. There were already 2 tries up, in the first was 8.5 minutes. So it was tough. It was a tough day. From that standpoint, but you're absolutely right. They were playing some lovely, intense, running lines, and they were really trying to sort of bring the physicality, which I think actually, the first, even probably to the first half hour, they were definitely winning. And then I think we started to maybe frustrate Russell a little bit more. There was quite a lot of hits going on him. I think Manoncello had a good few big old run at him, and you could see he was a little bit gun shy by the second half as well, and I think that probably frustrated Scotland, because almost everything that's magical goes through Finn, as we already know. So yeah. I mean, what were your thoughts as a bit of a neutral, if you don't mind me asking? It was one of those where it's easier to take off those rose-tinted glasses and speak to someone who doesn't have too much of a vested interest in either sort of team's victory. What were your sort of warm thoughts of the game, if that makes sense?
Well, let's start with Russell. I thought he regressed massively during this game. It looked like a performance from him from like 5+ years ago, when he was trying all the fancy flicks and offloads at inopportune times, and a lot of them were going to grass or into touch. So whether that was through Italian pressure, I'm not sure entirely, but it was a bad game from Russell. He did have some magic moments as well, of course. He's always going to have those, but it wasn't a consistent performance from him. On the Italian side, I just think they started a little bit soft, which, allowed Scotland to get that momentum, and then they really grabbed hold of it. But the first half, I would say, I characterized the performance of Italian pragmatism. Like, they definitely weren't playing in the middle third. And as soon as they did get positions, they either looked clunky in attack. The passing wasn't as fluid as I've seen in previous years, which saddens me, because that's what I've really loved about this Italian team. And when the passing was right, the detail at the ruck was wrong, which left Rory Darge opportunities to steal a load of ball at the breakdown, which he did very, very well.
Yeah, 100% agree with that analysis. That's like spot on. I think there was clearly some sort of disconnect, and I think I mentioned it to you as well on the preview, where we're sort of unfortunate and fortunate with the double-edged sword of the top 14, where they can just recall players. And I know obviously the same can be said about some of the Scottish players as well, but Garbisi, Lucchesi, like some of these key players for us, having to sort of go and realistically only have 2 or 3 training sessions before a test match, and having them in sort of key positions as well. You can see that, it clearly doesn't work. And for that reason, we always grow into a tournament. We always do better at the latter stages, because we can sort of work on that cohesiveness, because the vast majority of the team play Benetton. That's fair enough. Nice cohesive unit. But in the core positions, Martin Pedrello's at a different team to Garbisi. And then obviously, if we're going to chop and change a little bit, we might have Stephen Varney come up, and he hasn't played with maybe Tommy Allen as an example for a little while. So it's definitely something where we need to be better as a nation, to start strong, and maybe that's part of the game plan. It's one of those where I really don't know what the answer is. It's one that happens every year though, and we haven't won an opening game. Admittedly, we haven't won many games, but we haven't won an opening game since the only time we won the opening game, I believe, in 2014. So there's clearly something there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. A player you mentioned there, I wanted to ask you about, actually, because I think it was maybe a slight shock selection, which is Tommy Allen at fullback. And maybe, I don't know whether this was why, but his goal kicking was excellent on the day. So I was wondering if that was a real factor in his selection. Do you think?
Tommy's like he's at his best. He's like genuinely a really underrated fly half, like test level fly half. And I think he's had quite a lot of change, in France. He's playing both at fullback, both at 10. And like you said, he has been the designated goal kicker, and he's had fantastic stats all season. So I'm not surprised about the kicking. It just, for me, it seems like when we're looking at someone like Capozzo, who obviously plays in a similar position and is playing really well at Toulouse, even though, he's favoured on the wing instead there's definitely something where I think Tommy Allen was maybe meant to be distributing more than he potentially was been, and that would have justified his inclusion. But for whatever reason, I think his inclusion wasn't just purely for kicking. I think we expected a lot of kicking with Blair Kinghorn being at the back, and obviously Darcy Graham being a little whippet that he is, and being able to sort of chase those kicks and those contestables really well, which I thought actually he was fantastic at all game. So I don't know. It is my honest answer. I do think there's more to come from Tommy though. I strongly do believe that if we do have that ability to also utilize him as a second distributor, and we give our, quite frankly, exciting backs, a yard of space and a second of time. We're not the most physical backs, right? We do need that yard and that second, but if we can, then obviously that's where we can really hurt teams. So I think that was sort of the logic behind it, but that's my viewpoint, not anyone I've spoken to, sadly.
Yeah. Okay. So, but back to the sort of story of the game, I guess, and Scotland scored a third try through Ben White, wasn't it, after a Dave Cherry hooker's chicken wing offload, which everybody's got to love. But Italy was staying in it with these long-range penalties. The small amount of territory and possession that they did get, they were winning penalties, and Tommy Allen was kicking them. So suddenly you get to the start of the second half, it's 19-9. They kick another one, it's 19-12. after Scotland actually had a pretty decent chance to score a try themselves, and that was a massive swing in the game. I think it was the one where Russell passed back inside to Darcy Graham, and he just dropped it cold. I'm not sure if he would have scored, but it was a very strong position. Italy scored that fourth penalty shortly afterwards, and then the Brex interception immediately after that, and suddenly it's 19-all, and it seemed to happen almost from nowhere.
Yeah, one thing, and I'm hoping again, it's more of a question to you than anything, but one thing that I've noticed with this Italian team under Quesada, maybe even more so than Crowley, although, we spoke about sort of the fantastic attacking play with Crowley and, all of the excitement around that. The one thing that I see from this young team is the ability to stay in a game even when we're playing poorly. And that's something that I saw against Georgia as an example. It's something that I can see in this team. And I don't think we've ever had that. Potentially, early doors when our scrum was a real sort of weapon and we just kick points, and similar to how we played last week, I suppose. But it just what I mean. Just we had a decent kicker, and we just almost like the South African approach, where you just win scrum, penalty, scoreboard pressure, and then hopefully the game opens up enough for you to score, try and sort of see it out. But I think one thing from this, when it got to 19-all, it wasn't. It almost felt, and I was speaking to a lot of the Italian boys, and I was actually at a couple of my friend's house in England, waiting for the England game as well. It felt like something could happen there. It wasn't like Scotland are easily going to pull away. It was quite sort of a nervy time, and I think probably Scottish fans felt the same. So this team are starting to find ways of staying in games even when we're playing poorly, and that for me is like the biggest takeaway from the first game, if you can take too much away from the first game, if that makes sense.
100%, yeah. And it's such an important thing to have a team that will fight for each other and cling on to things and battle at breakdowns. And somebody I wanted to talk to you about that was Fischetti, the loosehead, was an absolute pain at the breakdown. Some of it legal, some of it illegal, which he got away with. But he was so active at the breakdown.
Oh, for sure. That's definitely his specialty. And I'm not going to pretend like I know the dark arts of what goes on underneath a Rocket International level. But what I'll say is, that's an area where we definitely need to improve. The best teams do it, and the best teams deploy it effectively. Where whether it, like you said, there's the grey lines, and then there's probably slightly more the black and white, and some people verge on both. But it was nice to see him in the right emotional frame of mind, because there's been times at Zebra this season where he's let himself boil over a little bit, and definitely not contributed to the ref being on our side and stuff. But I think he was in the right space. Clearly, him not being a captain on the field as much as he is a leader definitely allowed him just to sort of lead by example, which was quite cool. And yeah, he loves a turnover.
Yeah, for sure. But I guess now we're getting to the point of the game where the big, real change happened. And this was Hugh Jones's second try. And actually, it was only when I was rewatching today, I didn't realize how far back up the pitch this started from. It's from a scrum just outside the Scottish 22. But this isn't unusual for Scotland. They do play it like this quite a lot. And they just do flat, even passes across the back line and see what they've got on the outside. And what they had in the end was very little, until Darcy Graham chopped back inside and found a hole to go through, and then it was all over basically. But there was a lot of fortune in there for Darcy Graham. Did you see what happened?
Oh, so I can't speak about the fortuitous circumstance, but what I'll say is it's very similar to Capuozzo's try against Leicester, but that was off a line-out ball at halfway, where obviously they're getting the nimble person just to try and work it out. We'll pass you the ball, work it out. We'll be there in support. Just do what you need to do. Darcy Graham was a menace that game, and although he didn't put his name up in the lights like he normally would with tries scored, so much of what was good came through him that game. And like you said, obviously Finn's always going to be Finn, and he's always going to score tries, but set up tries. But just someone who notoriously is more sort of a finisher. He played really well with the ball. But what serendipitous events did I miss out then? Go on, Tim.
Well, there were two things, really. So I'd say he stepped inside three defenders. The fourth defender was Pajarello coming across, who tripped over a Scottish player on the way. So he would have been right in that hole to attempt the tackle at least, but he fell over. And then Garbisi, who was the third defender from the touchline, got a tiny little block. It was not illegal. It was not a penalty, but it definitely stopped him potentially making maybe a tap tackle or something like that. But great play from Graham to sort of recognise that hole and get through it.
Oh, for sure. Like, and these athletes know like their body better than anyone, so they know if there's like half a yard of space, and they know their limits. So they'll definitely he definitely, like you said, took advantage of that. I do actually remember the bit that you were talking about because Martin Pedrolo was in Carl Dixon's ear about that. Yeah, I didn't see it. One of my like I said, I was with a couple of my English mates, and they were the ones who brought it up, and yeah, I missed it. But to be honest with you, it swings and roundabouts, isn't it? Hopefully we get the rub of the green on another call, and we can just, it's money in the bank, and that's it.
Yeah.
But
well, it wasn't illegal. There was no challenge there by the Scottish player. It was just a clash of two people running different lines. It was not illegal at all. It was just unfortunate.
Fair enough. Yeah, no, fair enough. I meant more the Martin Pedrolo one, but yeah. So for me, at that point, it definitely felt like the game was slipping, momentum back on Scotland's side, even though there was, a period of quite nice sustained pressure from us. Again, we need to be better with our ability to score points when we enter the 22. And I think there was probably a point where, we didn't make the most of, potentially 2 or 3 opportunities to kick as well. So they'd scored, and then we decided that tries were what we were needed. We diverted from, the almost like the game plan from the start of the game where we were kicking points. And actually, one of my friend mentioned there was 3 penalties on the trot, kickable penalties, and we would have ended up in a much closer game and potentially in a slightly more frustrated Scotland. And who knows what happened. So, yeah, a lot to learn, I think.
Yeah. So Scotland scored again soon afterwards. That was Hugh Jones' hat-trick, which was a cracking finish, to be fair. Yeah. That was, he was 1-on-3, I think, when he got the ball, and he recognised that the Italian defenders were really scooting across to try and cover him, and got Garbisi off balance and powered through for the score. Great for him. You're missing Tuipulotu, so just get the other centre to really step up and score a hat-trick. Yeah, why not?
He's such a brilliant player.
Yeah, he's really good. He's playing great rugby for the last 2 or 3 years now, I'd say. But Italy, as you said, did have chances in that last 10 minutes. And there was one where they just chopped right from a central ruck, a couple of passes, and Gessie knocked the ball on with the line at his mercy. And that was the moment, because there was 7 minutes to go at that stage. You'd have been back within 5 points. And then, Scottish nerves might have started to come in because they've seen this kind of thing before. It was like I literally went no when it happened, because it would have set up a brilliant finale.
Yeah, that there was also a attacking phase where we had 3-on-1, Menoncello on Duhan van der Merwe about just on the 40, their half, and because Duhan committed, instead of popping it over to a 2-on-0 at that point, unless the fullback came over, and then it would have been a 2-on-1. He decided to go for the handoff, and maybe lesson learned there. Confidence might be a little bit too high from young Menoncello. So hopefully take some learnings from that, because had that ball gone as well, at the very least we were making 20 odd yards on that, and we're in there 22, and with quick ball, who knows what happens. And it's tough, but it was another one which stood out to me, unfortunately. And yeah. These are chances rude, but hopefully they're lessons learned, which is what I hope to see. I don't want to be seeing these same mistakes next week. And again, we're building into the tournament. We're sort of quite fortuitous that we started with Scotland, and it's probably given us quite a sort of a decent indication of where we need to improve. We have Wales, who may have learnt a lot from the France game. That I thought they were pretty good in the first half, and that's obviously an opportunity for us to capitalise on. And then if we can build some momentum at the latter stages, let's hope we can take a scalp.
Absolutely, absolutely. So there's only one other player that I wanted to mention, actually, and I didn't actually notice him too much in the game, but his stats are outstanding. I think it was in terms of carries, and that's Seb Negri, who carried the ball a heck of a lot and made a ton of tackles as well.
Yeah, so Seb's just a warrior. Like I said, he's one of the ones where I probably speak to the most. He's just someone who lives, breathes his rugby. He's very patriotic and proud to be representing Italy. And yeah, he just puts in these heroic efforts, and he's one of those who is quite happy to run 30 times to make a yard at a time. He's never going to be like Vincent or Lorenzo Cannone, where they can leverage their pace and their agility and make these ridiculous line breaks. But he's someone who gives us front football, and he just puts his body on the line time after time. So definitely someone who's probably undervalued from most Italian fans, and he's just someone who typically, when we're having a chat about who is one of those people who you just can't sub off at the start, who's your starter. Seb for me is that player. So yeah, he's again, hopefully he rests up. There's a lot more to come from him this tournament, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think we all know, like when you've played the game, we all know what it's like to have someone like that in your team. Just that Mr. Reliable, just always there, such a consistency of performance. Yeah, such an important player.
Yeah, no, I agree. And he's just one of those people who has experience. Again, not to underplay, some of the young boys have been getting over the past season or two, but it's a very young team. And even if we're looking at the back row, obviously between Cannone and between Cannone and Vincent, they probably don't have the caps that he does if you combine their caps. So having that experience, and obviously he's played in a losing team for a long time, but having the experience about game management and all of that stuff, that's invaluable for a team like ours.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, mate, we'll bring this to a close now. That was a lovely review of the game. But people at home, what do you think? Were there any players that we didn't mention that you thought played a really key role? Any sort of factors, any incidents that we didn't mention? Also, let us know in the comments down below, and we'll join you there and have a good old chinwag about them. While you're down there, give this video a thumbs up. It helps other great rugby fans like you find it. And once again, Mike from Fratelli D'Rugby, go and check out his channel as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me on, and well done on the accent, mate. Perfect.
Always a pleasure. People at home, you can subscribe there. You can watch that one next. And don't forget to get out and play.